Mayor, your mics are on. Don't say anything you don't want recorded. Mayor, your mics are on, and we're recording. Don't know. Stanford's like,
Can't see the audience.
I know. I can see it. It's good. I can see Riley. Tell me when to.
we're good to go.
Everybody's mics on. Mute your phones, please. All right, I'd like to call our budget meeting to order. Thursday, March 28th. Hopefully Kelly will show up here shortly. I first wanted to mention, we've lost a dear friend on Beech Mountain. For most people know, but if you don't, Pete Chamberlain passed away Tuesday night around 2 a.m. He's been fighting an illness for some time, and it finally got the best of him. We always thought Pete would get the best of whatever came in front of him, but if you keep his family in your prayers, please. Also, I'd like to recognize the TDA for coming today. We've had a good working relationship with the new TDA, and we want to continue this partnership with them and try to subsidize some of the tourism expenses that the town pays for, and hopefully the TDA will help the town out subsidizing some of these ongoing expenses. Pledge of allegiance, please. Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
One more thing about Pete that I think is pretty cool for Beech Mountain is Stanford and I are on the National Ski Patrol, which I had to retire a month early because I got injured. But Pete had been on ski patrol for how many years?
70 years active.
70 years active. He was the oldest active ski patrol member in the United States. So we're very blessed to be a part of that. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to our town manager, Chief Putney.
Well, Mayor, thank you. Mayor and Council, let me go briefly through what our purpose is today. It's a limited budget meeting, limited agenda. Our purpose is threefold. We need to go through our capital expenditures for the 24-25 budget. During your budget retreat, your number two priority was to fund the capital improvement plan. And when Steve and I started putting the budget together, the capital improvement plan that's called for in 2024-25 is a little over $1.8 million. And quite honestly, we can't afford that. So the purpose of today's meeting is to present the CIP, the capital improvement plan, and ask you to set some priorities. We have listed our priorities. Hopefully you agree. But if not, I need to either have direction to fund that amount, which would require substantial contribution from fund balance, which I would not recommend, or work with staff to reduce that capital expenditure down to something that we can afford and we can work into the budget. The next item we want to do, or in conjunction with that, is share with you the town's financial planning model. Our vice mayor and mayor have seen this before. We've been operating this, I think, for about 4 years. The new council members, we want to show that to you. I don't expect you to become proficient in it today. It is very detailed, very has a lot of data in it. The dashboard is what I'd like to focus on today, and Mr. Cheatwood, who is our financial advisor and runs this model, is going to present it to you. And once you get a feel of it, what I'd like you to do is ask some questions. And the model is dynamic, and it's real time. So if you say take a police car out of the budget, what does that mean? How does it adjust our fund balance? More importantly, what does it do to the future of the town? Now, a police car isn't going to impact us greatly, but there are some things in the CIP that have they're expensive and they have some long-lasting effects in the budget. I've shared with you that in the past, the town has budgeted, years past, not when I got here, but has budgeted for 12 months at a time. And the law requires we do that. The state statute requires we produce a balanced budget, by July 1st of each year, and it's for 12 months. However, that the town doesn't run 12 months. So if we only focus on 12 months of expenditures and not concern ourselves with month 13, as an example, then we're doing a disservice, one, to the town and the taxpayers, but it makes it extremely difficult to manage the town when we reset everything every 12 months. So this model allows us, with good data now, we have audited data that is in the model, allows us to project into the future, 3-5 years. We'll even go a little bit further in the model. The further out you go, the less accurate it becomes. But it gives us an ability to really focus on what our expenditures over time do to the town. Not only for the tax ad valorem rate, our fund balance in the utility, our cash on hand, those type of things. And Mr. Cheatwood's going to be able to zero in on that with you today. And the last thing I need you to do today is have a discussion with the TDA. On April 17th, which is the next meeting, we'll come together for a public meeting on the budget. I have a number of projects that are budgeted in the town's budget that I've noted to be TDA funded only. Quite frankly, if the TDA can't or will not fund those projects, we're not going to do them, and we'll need to pull them out of the budget at that point. So today, I invited the TDA. I went to their budget retreat. We had a nice discussion. They felt it would be advantageous to have a joint meeting between the town council and the TDA. I invited them to this meeting today. Those three items we need to address, and if we can get that done in 2 hours or less, everyone would appreciate that. So basically, what I need to do is get enough direction tonight so that Steve Smith and I can produce the draft budget, finalize it for the April 17th meeting. That's the purpose of today. Any questions for me on what we need to do today? So I'd like to turn it over to David Cheatwood, who is our financial advisor on our financial model, and he has provided you a copy of the presentation, and he's got the working model with him. David?
Great, thanks, Bob. Mayor, Council, good afternoon. Thanks very much for having us here today. I'd like to introduce my colleague as well, Chazo Habliston. By way of really quick background, I know I've presented to this council a couple times in the past, although I know we've got a few new council members, but our firm, First Trine Advisors, we're based in Charlotte. We serve as financial advisors to cities, towns, counties, utility systems across the Carolinas and Georgia. Chazo and I primarily work with the local governments and utility systems in North and South Carolina. Our role is to, again, serve as financial advisor. We sit on your side of the table. We have a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest, and in this regard, we're going to provide you with a lot of information so y'all can make fully informed decisions going forward. We work hand in hand with the local government commission, who's the governing body here, or the body in North Carolina that's got to approve any sort of long-term financings that you do. We work with the legal counsels as well. We know the North Carolina statutes, so really know what you all can do from a financing standpoint versus pay-as-you-go. And so we, again, do a lot of this work across the state. Long-term financial and capital planning is a big part of what we do, and that's what we've been working with the town for a number of years on. As Bob mentioned, we've got a what we call originally a capital planning model, financial planning model that we've had with the town for a number of years. We update it on an annual basis as y'all get in audited financial statements, as you have a new budget, as your capital improvement plan gets updated and changes. So we're in regular contact with Bob and Steve on updates there. And so you've got a pretty hefty slide deck in front of you. Before we get into the model, I wanted to do a really quick update on just, let's set the stage. Where is the town right now from a financial standing standpoint? So looking back quickly before we then look forward, which I know is the main purpose of today's meeting. So we'll cycle through these first couple slides here fairly quickly. So if you go back one, in our model, what we're focused on, y'all got three primary funds. You have your general fund, you have your water and sewer fund, and you have your sanitation fund. And so that's what we built in the model. We load up historical results, and then we are able to project out your operating revenues, your operating expenses, and also load up your capital improvement plan, your wish list of projects, things that are out on the horizon. You know, to Bob's point, to echo that, you know, the big, or one of the big benefits of a model like this is to take you outside of just the next year coming up, so that you can make those fully informed decisions that if you do this year, you know what's coming in year 2, 3, 4 down the road. It helps you put everything together and kind of make it, instead of making decisions in a vacuum year to year, you're looking at it from a longer term horizon. That longer term horizon, typically 3 to 5 years at most. Again, as Bob said, once you get past 5 years, there's a lot of things that are going to change over time, capital projects, revenues, expenses. And so when we look at projections, primarily we're focused on the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm going to take you through historical, where you are on each of these funds right now, and then we'll jump into going forward from a projection standpoint, how things look. So starting with your outstanding debt, we always load up and have available an entity's outstanding debt. That's important so that we know when debt is rolling off over time. That's oftentimes a natural spot to layer in new debt because it can mitigate the impact if you have old debt rolling off. Y'all have from a general fund, this is what you're paying out of general fund, which is primarily property tax driven, pretty minimal debt outstanding, about 3.8 million as of the start of fiscal year 2024. So this is as of June 30, 2023, you had 3.8 million outstanding. It consists of 3 different financings that you've done over the years. The most recent being what you're working on right now. Y'all borrowed $550,000 for the town hall addition and renovation here. That is the total principal amount of debt you have outstanding, 3.8 million. If you look at the chart at the bottom, to my earlier point, when is debt rolling off? The bottom is principal plus interest. So that is annual debt service that you're paying each year. You'll see that you're right around $450,000 out of your general fund this fiscal year. That stays, you have a little bit of a decline year over year, but then you have some debt rolling off from fiscal 27 to fiscal 28. So again, keeping that in mind when we look at potential new borrowings, again, a natural spot if it works out timing wise to layer in new debt and mitigate that impact. So that is your current debt service structure for debt that's repaid out of your general fund. We'll get to the other funds here in just a minute. Taking you through your revenues and expenditures on your general fund. You all, like most local governments, are primarily driven by property tax revenue. It makes up 65% of your total revenues. Outside of that, your local option sales tax is approximately 20%. And then the remaining 17% is made up of various revenue sources: franchise tax, utility franchise tax, Powell bill allocation, some hold harmless funds, and other miscellaneous revenues like interest earnings or things like that. To give you a little bit of history on what's been going on over the last 5 years for each of these primary revenue streams, from a property tax standpoint, you all collected just over $7 million the last fiscal year 2023. You'll see going back over time, that was a pretty big jump over the prior years, and that was due to the revaluation that became effective in fiscal year 2023. Before that, you were in the $4 to $5 million range. Y'all have seen steady growth, just natural growth in your tax base, and then with the reval, you saw a bigger jump last year. From a sales tax perspective, again, fairly steady from 19, saw a little bit of dip in 20, just right at the outset of COVID, but since then, that revenue stream has increased year over year. You collected about $1.9 million in fiscal year 2023 from your local option sales tax. So again, those two revenue sources make up about $9 million of your total general fund budget, not to be mixed with your water, sewer, or sanitation. Looking at, on page 4, total revenues, again, I just wanted to give you the detail on those two primary revenue streams, but if we take it at a higher level in terms of total revenue, you'll see that going back over the last 5 audited years, back in 2019, your general fund produced about $6.7 million in total revenue, and now you're up to about 10.9 million in total revenue, again, largely driven from the increase in the property tax and the sales tax.
Quick question,
Yes,
what's the normal general fund percentage
Um,
for a
for
town
those
like Beach Mountain?
general fund, like the total dollar amount of a general fund.
Or there's a percentage, I was told 33.
You may be referring to your fund, like your general fund balance. What is that percentage? That's all.
37%.
Yeah, there are, it kind of depends on who you're, if you're targeting against your peers or what the local government commission looks at or what lenders may look at. I'd say generally speaking, 30 to 40% is a good, kind of puts you in good company with your fund balance. We can go back to that. If that doesn't answer, and we've got some detail on where you stand from a fund balance perspective, but
Sorry.
I think you might be referring to
Yeah.
percentage, your general fund balance as a percentage of your general fund expenditures is often the percentage that's cited.
Gotcha.
So that may be what you're referring to.
Thank you.
So good news, revenues are increasing. The flip side of that is your expenditures are increasing as well. And so your main expenditures consist of road maintenance, you have administration expenses, and police. Outside of that, you have other in culture and recreation, fire, your capital outlay, and then your debt service that we just went through out of your general fund. From a road maintenance standpoint, y'all are putting money into your roads each and every year. That is generally increased year over year, slight decrease in 2023. You had about 2.8 million going to road maintenance there. A lot of that's coming from the Powellville funding as well, but 2.8 million. If you look on the administration side, which is all the general salaries, benefits of employees and other administrative costs, again, fairly flat from 2019 to 21, but then we've seen an increase over the last couple of years, like most have. Again, with inflation running pretty rampant over the last couple of years, we've seen growth in all these different revenue line items here. But you had about $2.1 million in expenses for administration. And then similarly on the police expenditure side of things, that has steadily grown year over year over the last 4 years. Taking you to that bigger picture on total expenditures, again, it's gone, if you look at the bottom line, total expenditures has really gone in line in terms of the trend with your operating revenues. So 6.3 million up to 9.8 million in fiscal year 2023. Again, very standard picture for your peers across the state. Your revenues are increasing, but your expenses are increasing right along with that. So going to your fund balance, Vice Mayor, what we were just talking about, within your general fund, you all have total fund balance, or you had total fund balance as of June 30, 2023, so the end of the last fiscal year. This is in your audit. Total fund balance of $7.7 million. There's a couple of different buckets of that fund balance. A portion of it is non-spendable. A portion of it is restricted for certain uses. The main ones we're looking at are, you can, as a board, you can assign it for certain projects. That's within your control. It's not restricted other than what you all assign it for. Oftentimes, you can assign fund balance as a part of the next year's budget to cover certain capital items. That's a fairly standard practice there. The main thing we focus on is the unassigned fund balance. That is basically the remaining funds after the different buckets there of restricted and committed and assigned. That is what is left over. That's going to give you your cash balance to cover, as y'all know, your property tax revenue primarily comes in the December, January time frame, and so y'all have got to get through the July to December time frame until those revenues come in. So that's kind of the first line of defense, is using your unassigned fund balance to get you through the lean months until your big revenues start to come in. And then it's also there to provide you cushion against unexpected capital items that come up. If there's a weather event or a natural disaster, that's your cash available to fund any unexpected expenditures. And also to, you all may want to dedicate a portion of that to fund certain capital outlay as well, keeping an eye on what is that ultimate remaining percentage going forward. And that's going to be the main thing we focus on when we pull up the model. What's the comfort level of council? What's the minimum amount you want to keep in there as your target? And then that'll tell you how much of that you can potentially use for some of these capital projects we're talking about.
David, is
Yes, sir.
restricted funds that have been earmarked or specifically allocated for capital improvement project?
That would, the restricted is going to be more like Powell bill funds that are coming in that have to go to street projects. And so legally restricted.
Right.
Whereas you all can commit or assign funds as a governing body for certain capital projects as well, but that would fall under either, again, committed or assigned, meaning you all can decide later to uncommit them or unassign them if you wanted to, if the project changed. But if you wanted to set aside funds, you would do that within your committed fund balance. Restricted is going to be, there's a legal restriction on certain revenues that have to go to projects. I think Powell bills, probably, that's the main part of that restricted balance.
And non-spendable is defined as,
Not, and Steve, jump in and help me out here. Non-spendable is like
It would be
receivable.
Inventories,
Yeah.
well, inventory jumps out at me.
Like
Anything else would
receivables.
be really small. Most of that would probably be leftover road salt from prior year and that sort of thing.
So that unassigned, often quoted as a percentage of your expenditures. If you think about it like this, if your revenues stopped coming in, how long would your fund balance carry you for from an expenditure standpoint? How long could you keep operating the town, keep paying employees, funding capital until that money ran out? Again, that's not realistically what would happen, but that's the purpose of the percentage. And so based on your fiscal 23 audit, that 5.7 million of unassigned fund balance equated to 65% of operating expenditures. If you stripped out the capital and the debt service component of it, it was about 60% of total expenditures. That's a very strong level. Y'all have historically had very strong levels of fund balance. Again, that provides you a lot of flexibility going forward, provides you a lot of protection against unknown events or things that pop up. And again, we can talk about this when we get into the model. Targeting what that minimum balance is. Different councils have different comfort levels on what they want to keep in there. I would say at a bare minimum, y'all wouldn't want to go below 30%. Given that you've been a good bit higher than that, which we can show you the percentages, y'all have been historically in the 50 to 70% range. And so kind of goes back, if you want to keep with past trends, you probably wouldn't want to drag that down too much, but that's within your discretion.
Does that not, with the fund balance that we have, does that not give us more bargaining power when we borrow money?
It is a credit factor that when you go to borrow money, banks, that's one of the main things they'll look at. What is your fund balance level? And so yes, the stronger you are, and that's one of several, but that's a pretty key one. So if you have a really strong fund balance, that often heightens your credit worthiness in the eyes of a bank, and then the bank would be willing to give you a slightly lower interest rate versus someone that had a much more narrow or smaller fund balance. So yes, they are tied together. So that's on the general fund side. To take you through the water and sewer fund here for a second, I'm going to same drill. I'll talk you through debt service, revenues, expenditures. Out of your water sewer fund, you all have about 8.9 million of debt outstanding as of June 30, 23. It consists of a couple low interest loans that you've gotten from the state revolving fund, which is the state fund for clean water or drinking water. Very low interest rates there, and then you have a couple small bonds outstanding, one from USDA, and then a couple small installment financings. So 8.9 million total principal outstanding. Looking at your debt service chart at the bottom, which is principal plus interest, that's your annual payment each year. You're a little bit under $700,000 in the current fiscal year. That also declined slightly. You also have a little bit of a cliff, not a ton of roll-off capacity there, but a little bit of the cliff from fiscal 28 to fiscal 29. Taking you through your revenues, your user revenues, your charges for services, that's your primary revenue stream there. And you'll see with that, with some of the increases that have occurred over the last couple of years, your water and sewer revenues have increased as well. You were at 3.7 million in fiscal year 2023, which was about a $500,000 increase over the prior fiscal year. And again, this picture on page 12 is pretty much the same. Since 95% plus of your revenues come from the water charges, that's what's driving your total revenue history. But you'll see with some of the increases that have been put into place over the last couple of years, your revenues have really jumped there in 22 and 23. On the expenditure side of things, that's going to be your treatment, administrative cost, and debt service. That has increased over time as well. You were at $950,000 in fiscal year 2023, average growth rate of about 7.6% over that 5-year period. I'll skip ahead to slide 15, and if I'm going too fast on any of this, please let me know, but just trying to cover the historical first. If you look at total of expenditures, that has grown year over year. Actually, you had a decline from 19 to 20, just because if you look at that existing debt service, you had some debt that rolled off from 19 to 20, which reduced your total debt service and therefore reduced your total expenditures. Since that time, though, your expenditures have been increasing. And part of the rate increases you've been putting into place are not, which is a very good practice, it's not just for the next or the current year's expenditures. You're putting it in place to help you fund some projects you know you have coming down the road. Because if you can go ahead and bank some of that money now, it's going to lower the overall rate increase versus waiting until that need arises in a given year, which typically then requires a higher rate increase. So y'all have had the good forward thinking to put that into place as your capital needs start to increase on your water sewer side. Similar to your fund balance on your general fund, we look at your fund balance on your water sewer fund, which is your unrestricted cash. You had about $2.2 million of unrestricted cash within your water and sewer fund as of June 30, 2023. It's again very similar. We were talking about the percentage of expenditures on the general fund. We convert it to days cash on hand for your water and sewer fund, your utilities fund. So you had about a year's worth of cash on hand in your utility fund, which is really strong, gives you a lot of flexibility. Again, the plan is to use some of that likely for some projects, pay-as-you-go projects down the road. And then last, sanitation, very straightforward on the debt. You do pay a little bit of debt out of your sanitation fund, about $1.2 million. Your annual payments right now are about $150,000 per year. About half of that rolls off from 27 to 28, so some pretty limited needs there. Vehicles and equipment, and then a portion of one of your prior borrowings, a portion of it the sanitation fund pays for. Your charges for service have increased over the years pretty dramatically, doubled over the last 5 years, and we're around $700,000 in fiscal year 2023. And then on an expenditure side of things, salaries and benefits make up the lion's share of your expenses there, along with just other operating and capital needs. So if you look at your total expenditures on 2020, slide 22, you were about $706,000 in fiscal year 23. And then you had around $500,000 of cash on hand in your sanitation fund at June 30, 23. So to sum up all of what you saw there, you're really strong financially right now. You're in a good position. You do have a lot of capital projects on the horizon. And so that'll be something we'll talk through about how to fund those and what the impact is, but you're in a really good position to be able to address a large number of those, just given the steps you've taken from the revenue side, keeping expenses in check as best you can. You're in a good spot on all of that, financially very healthy. So moving into the heart of the presentation here on the capital planning and long-term forecasting here. So we'll pull this model up. It's an Excel-based model that we've used. We love Excel because it's highly customizable. We can really drill down on town-specific, what y'all need to see. It gives us a lot of flexibility. We've got things that you can turn on and off quickly to see the impact, moves projects out, change amounts, and we'll see what the impact is. The things we're focused on within the model are really what we just went through. We've loaded up your existing debt. We've loaded up your historical operating performance for revenues and expenditures, and then we've dropped in your full, I'll kind of go back and forth between your capital improvement plan, but also project wish list too. Everything that's on the horizon, potentially, we've loaded up, and then we can start to turn things on and off as we go to help you zero in on what to fund specifically for fiscal 25, but then keeping an eye on fiscal 26 and beyond, what else is out there on the horizon. And we're focused on, or in terms of outputs from your general fund side, is there a property tax impact to any of this? What is the impact on fund balance, making sure we maintain a minimum level from a percentage standpoint? From a water and sewer side, what is the rate impact there? Making sure we maintain a minimum level of cash going forward, complying with any sort of financial policies or targets like minimum fund balances. And then, again, projecting out not just the capital side, but let's project out the operating revenues and expenses as well, because we have to do that so we know what our ending fund balance could be going forward, and not just look at capital in isolation. Let's look at, are there expenses on the operating side as well? What's happening with revenues? So we try to build it all into the model. Now,
So this is gonna project water, sewer
yes, and so we have
rates
general fund.
as well as
Yes, ma'am.
ad valorem.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we have it all
Gotcha.
built in there. Now, if we go to, let's go to slide 27. Like any forecasting model, we have to make assumptions on certain things here. And so I want to go through what our high-level assumptions are starting out. We can change any of these if you wanted to look at sensitivity of different assumptions. It's all, again, very dynamic, but we've got to start with something here. And so let's focus on the general fund side. Again, your primary revenue stream is property tax revenue. So what we've assumed is that your tax rate for now stays flat to where it is, and but your value of a penny is going to increase over time as your assessed value grows. Just with redevelopment, new development that may come in, you're going to see natural growth in your tax base. So this is to start out, any sort of increase in property tax revenue is not being generated from a property tax increase. It's just being generated from growth in your assessed value, and therefore your value that a penny on the tax rate generates. So we've assumed that it grows, that value of a penny grows by 3.5% from fiscal 24 to fiscal 25, and 2% each year thereafter.
So 2%, is that like for inflation or
Yeah,
CPI?
well, just really looking at historical growth in your value of a penny, taking out the noise of the reval year. How much has your tax base been growing year over year? So that's why we load up those historicals as well to see what you've been growing. The CPI is really going to be more tied to the operating expenditures, but the revenues are going to be driven primarily from what's going on with your tax base. What do we think is going to be going on with your tax base going forward? And that is, I should note all these, we're not the boots on the ground here in the town to know what's going on with different developments or things that are happening. That's where we work with Bob and Steve to say, all right, are these reasonable assumptions going forward based on, we can look at historical, but tell us what you know about what's going on currently in the town. So that's going to be the biggest driver there, and we can look at sensitivity if that's faster, if that growth is higher, I should say, or less, lower. We can play with those different variables. Basically, all the other revenue streams, we have increased the recreation department fees 3.5% per year. Everything else we've just assumed grows 1% per year. Just some growth in your revenues, whether that's higher usage or primarily driven by higher usage or revenues coming in. On the expenditure side of things, we've broken it down into a couple of different buckets. Salaries and employee benefits, we've assumed grow by 3% per year, largely in line, Mayor, with inflation. And then all other operating expenditures, a little bit less than what inflation is right now at 1% per year. As y'all have been seeing, inflation after peaking at 8, 9, 10%, is kind of back in that 3.5% range. The Fed's goal is to get it back to a 2% year over year. We're still a little ways from doing that. But so really, if you look at the blend of operating, it's a blend of employee salaries and benefits and other. So the blend is kind of in line with inflation overall. And then capital outlay, those are things we'll talk about, what we have in the model and what we can turn on and off. And then debt service consists of your existing debt, and there are certain projects in your CIP that are just too big to be funded out of your fund balance, so you would borrow for those, so we've turned on certain borrowings as well. On the water and sewer fund, just to go through those assumptions, a lot of detail here, but I'll hit a couple things. One, from a customer growth standpoint, so your revenues are going to increase from two factors. One, your customer base growing, and then two, your rates going up. So from a customer base, we've assumed 2% growth from fiscal year 24, the current year, to next year, fiscal 25, and then 1% each year thereafter. So slight growth in your customer base each year. And those are just on the residential customer side. And then on the water and sewer rates, this is largely in line with what you've seen before. We built in rate increases assumptions here. These are, again, just for your illustrative purposes now. These are not all approved or by any means. So 9% in fiscal 25, 8% for the next 2 years in 26 and 27, and then 7% 28, 6% in 29, 2% thereafter. A lot of that, most of it is just driven by the capital needs that you have on the water and sewer side, a portion of which is the Lake Coffee Reservoir as well, which we'll hit on. On availability fees, that's another revenue stream that does flow into your water sewer fund that you use for capital projects. We've assumed it actually goes down in fiscal 25, and then it goes down again in 2026, and then it stays flat. So we're trying to, if some of those availability fees that are coming from the developers, their development starts to slow a little bit, those fees will be reduced accordingly. And then for the other revenues, which are relatively minor, anywhere from 0 to 3% annually. On the expenditure side of things, we've assumed 3% annually in line with inflation. Capital and debt, as I mentioned before, would be tied into whatever the capital improvement plan, the projects ultimately be or end up being. And then lastly, on the sanitation fund, revenues, 2% growth per year for the charges for services. And then on the expenditure side of things, a larger bump in fiscal 25 for salaries and benefits of 5%, then 3% thereafter, all other expenditures at 1% annually.
So these percentages that you're showing, 2%, 3%, is that the historical data that you're using to get that information, and then with the input from our town manager and finance director?
Exactly, yes. So that's why we like to see the trend data. And so that's where if Bob or Steve said that, let's assume it goes down by 10%, we could look at the historical data and say, well, it's been going up each year thereafter, kind of what's happening. So the trend data helps us, but then yes, we're absolutely relying on Bob and Steve to say, all right, what's reasonable going forward for each of those revenue or expenditure items.
And when you come up with these percentages, do you try to stay on the conservative side, or do you try to split it right in the middle? We try not to be so ultra conservative with them that it changes your decision making. We don't want to be so conservative and to assume 5 or 7% growth on everything, which then would lead y'all to not move forward on certain projects potentially because we're showing operating expenses going up and you're going to need a lot of revenues, or that would cause you to have higher rate increases that are necessary. So we're trying to thread the needle a little bit and be somewhat conservative but not overly so.
And when you're saying 2% on increase in revenues, that's not necessarily a rate increase. It's more sewer taps, more water taps being added, and therefore your revenues will be greater.
On the water and sewer rates, we are talking about rate increases. On the availability, the other revenue streams, which frankly don't make up a big part of your total revenues, we've just assumed a flat growth rate. But on the actual water sewer user rates, yeah, we were talking about actual rate increases. Yes, sir. So let's get into the capital side, and this is where, in just a couple slides, we're gonna pull up the model here and we can start to look at it. We've put in some screenshots here from what we currently have turned on in the model, but we'll go to a live version here. So as part of your fiscal '24 budget, there were a number of projects that were identified in the CIP out of these different funds. There's a detailed list in the back. We've summarized them from kind of general fund, water sewer fund, sanitation fund. And within the model, certain projects are eligible for grant funding. And so with Bob and Steve's input, we've said if you've got a certain project that has grant funding, let's load that grant funding in too. So we're just focused on the net funding that the town would be responsible for. But these are a very high level summary of the different capital items that were a part of your fiscal '24 budget and CIP. And you'll see again over that period that went out from '24 to 2029, it totaled $58 million across all the different funds. And again, there's some bigger ticket items. You'll go straight to fiscal '28. You'll see that $20 million in the water and sewer. That's the Lake Coffee Reservoir project there. So obviously really big ticket item there, the biggest of the bunch in all this. But those individual projects are in an appendix, and it's going to be easier for us to pull that up on the screen. But real quick screenshots on page 30 just to show you what we're able to do. We can turn projects on and off. If a certain project requires a borrowing, we're going to put in our debt assumptions. How long are you going to repay that? What's the term of that debt? What's the assumed interest rate on that debt? These are all variables that we can input into the model and look at changes. I will, we can again kind of go through these. Probably within the model is the easiest way to go through all of those.
So tanker replacement fire truck. Gotcha. Okay. Thhank you.
And what we're ultimately focused on, if you look at 31, maybe a little bit easier here, and then we'll pull up the model. But these are screenshots from our dashboard tab within the model. So on the general fund, as I mentioned earlier, we're focused on what's the tax rate, which is on the left-hand side. We can show increases or decreases to that tax rate going forward. You're at 65 cents this current year, fiscal year. We can show growth in that value of a penny. Your current value of a penny is around $100,000. Again, so as your tax base grows, we want to assume some growth there. As I mentioned earlier, we've assumed 3.5% for this upcoming fiscal year, then 2% thereafter. And then we're really focused at the end of the day, general fund, how much unassigned fund balance do you have left if you follow a certain funding plan for these projects? So we're looking at that on both a dollar basis and a percentage basis. We've gone ahead, just presumptively here, and put in a minimum of 30% that you wouldn't want to go below. And so you'll see if it ever does get below, it's going to red flag in a year. It's going to quickly identify we need to do something to fix that, either turn a project off, move it out, increase our revenues, decrease our expenses.
David, I
yes,
don't
sir.
know if now's the time to ask this question, but where you've got the tax rate at 65 cents for the next 10 or 12 years. One question that I hear most often is, why can't we be tax revenue neutral? And my response is, because the town will go broke in the next 2 or 3 years if you stay on that trend. What I like to see whenever it's appropriate is plug in like 47 cents
Sure.
to see where the town is financially in 3 years.
Yep.
What it does to, so if you go to 47 cents, I'd like for you to explain what it does to our fund balance, what it does to our revenue stream, and the I'd say catastrophic effect that it's going to have on our town.
Sure. And that's a good transition because, again, the rest of these are screenshots from the model, which are focusing on the things I've described, the rate impact, the fund balance, the cash balance. So what Chaz has pulled up here on the screen, looking over his shoulder here, quick orientation within the model. We start with the CI. Again, we've loaded up all your revenues and expenses based on those assumptions going forward. We have a CIP tab where this is where Bob and Steve have provided all the different projects that are out there, that could be out there over the next 5+ years or so. We load those up on the left-hand side. That's the project description. We're going to tell the model, what fund or category. Is that a police project? Is that a fire project? that doesn't really determine anything. It's just more of a, just to kind of keep track of things. We then tell the model under column 4 what fund is going to fund that project. General fund, water, sewer, sanitation. So then it flows through the correct fund. And we can tell the model, what is my funding source for that project? Is it going to be a pay-as-you-go project, so coming out of your annual revenues or fund balance? Is it coming from a grant or third-party source? Or is it a debt finance project? And so we can, Chazo, if you show the drop-down box, we can flip, those are your 3 primary funding sources for any project. We can flip back and forth and look at different things there. You'll see a lot of on-off buttons. If we turn a project off, it's going to gray out, which means it's not flowing through the model anymore. So this is that sensitivity analysis or kind of functionality we can get to here in a second. And then if you scroll out a little bit, Chazo, you'll see it goes out a number of years. And then if we scroll down, we have, go back over so you can see the different projects. We have all these different projects in there that have been identified as potential needs. We have your current year loaded up, your fiscal 24. So I know today we're focused on 25 and going forward. So some of these, everything in 24 is either in process or y'all previously looked at and approved. So we're focused on 25 going forward in all your different funds. General fund, if we scroll down more, water, sewer, and then any sort of borrowing need, you'll see certain projects that are turned on as debt. Those are highlighted in yellow. We then have to go onto our dashboard tab and turn that project on as a debt-funded project and put in our interest rate and repayment term assumptions.
Go back to item 54 or 53.
Sure.
My eyes, let's see. Oh, it was 51. I thought that said ABC store, but that says ABC store.
I'm gonna give it
I was like, wow.
We're gonna give it
Throw that in there.
a big up. Yeah.
I was hoping you wouldn't see that.
So right now, that's what is, these various projects are turned on in the model. And so, Chazo, if you go all the way to the bottom in terms of what's turned on, it'll show.
Quick question, when it says
Yes, sir.
2024, that's our existing year?
That is your current year. So that is going to be your fiscal year 24, which is year ending June 30, 24, the one you're currently in.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So for today and going forward, we're focused on 25 and out. So you'll see all the different projects and the tallies here. Maybe hide those couple of fun, maybe hide that fun category for a second. You'll see from a general fund standpoint, focus on 25 and beyond. There are projects that are identified of 2.9 million in 25, 1.3 million in 26. You'll see between debt and pay-as-you-go another 1.5 million in 27. And then on the water side, there's some bigger ones there, but you also have some good grant third-party sources coming in as well on that one to cover some of that. So we'll come back to the CIP. Mayor, to answer your question, if we go back to the dashboard tab, and this is where we're going to ultimately live on this tab and we can see what this does. So if we focus on the general fund for a second, what this will do in fiscal 25, if we tell the model, keep everything else equal in terms of your operating expenses there with those assumptions we talked about for growth, if we keep all the capital turned on that we currently have turned on, but we lower the tax rate to 47 cents, you'll see that it's going to do two things before you press enter. You'll see that on the 65 cents, you're projected to generate about $6.6 million in property tax revenue. Your value of a penny is about $100,000. So if we decrease it by 18 cents, it's going to go down by about 1.8 million. And a couple other things are going to happen. You're going to see your fund balance also go down, and it may red flag if you go down. It likely will below 30%. So if we press enter there on the 47, so that's what's happened. Your property tax revenues, if you highlight that, Chazo, went down from highlight the particular year, 6.3 to 4.7 because you lowered your tax rate, which is your primary revenue stream. And unless you adjust your operating expenses to go lower, unless you turn off your capital, you're just going to draw down your fund balance
And cut services out.
Right. And so after a year of that, you're going to be negative. And so you would drop down to 20% unassigned fund balance in fiscal year 25, and then you'd quickly go negative. And so that's, again, within the model. If you said, all right, well, we want to do that, we would say, okay, well, now we got to go and cut expenses, and now we have to take out capital or any future debt, which again is, I can go ahead and that's going to be extremely hard to get to, even if we did do that. But to keep up with your operating expenses and your capital, that wouldn't be sustainable.
Yeah.
Let's not leave it on screen
The
too
results
long.
from our last budget retreat
can-
are now part of this wish list that is
Yes.
hanging out.
Everything we've discussed up till today is, the model is current today,
Okay.
with the exception of the mayor's reduction in ad valorem.
Well, I know what to do. I'd like others to recognize.
Well, also remember, Mayor, and David can go back to that if you'd like, but we have existing debt service. If you
Right.
cut services and you did everything you needed to do to get to that number, we have existing debt that we cannot do
We'll
away
be
with.
satisfied.
So the current model that's sitting here is leaning toward keeping the same, but not increasing, is what I'm,
As in-
and
The tax
that's
rate.
what I'm looking at right here.
Correct. When
Okay.
we met in the end of January, beginning of February, the three things you told me to do, it was keep the tax rate the same, keep our benefits at 50% for employee, spouse and family the same at 50%, and you wanted me to fund the CIP,
Okay.
and that's what we've done.
So in 25, if you go to 66 cents, what's that going to increase? Is that just going to increase it around $100,000?
That's right. So yeah, if we do that, it'll take your fund balance from exactly up $100,000. And to go back a second, just to highlight kind of what we're looking at here, if you maintain the same tax rate, 65 cents, and then you, and your tax base grows by 3.5%, and you keep the same capital that's turned on right now, which in fiscal 25 in your general fund, right now what's turned on in terms of capital is $2.9 million. And if we want to, maybe Chazo, let's pick out the big ticket items of what that's included in 2025.
That was at 2.9 in CIP?
In CIP, in fiscal year, the upcoming fiscal year 25, what is currently turned on, so you're not committed to doing this yet, but that's got, if we just focus on some of the bigger ones, street resurfacing, $1.2 million, renovation of the old PW's Public Works, right?
Yes.
$500,000, salt storage facility, $160,000. I'm happy to go through them all. I'm just trying to hit a couple of those big ones that are getting you up. These are all out of the general fund. A dump truck there of $220,000. Those are the main ones. If you did all of that next year, if you go back to the dashboard, you'll see that your fund balance is going to drop from the 5.7, you were at 5.7 million unassigned fund balance, if you remember from 2023. We've loaded up your 24 budget right now. Y'all, if history proves, you may outperform your budget by the time you get to June 30. So outperform meaning you may end up increasing your unassigned fund balance with revenues outpacing your expenditures. Historically, y'all have been able to do that a little bit. For now, we've assumed you basically hold steady. So you stay at 5.7 million at June 30, 2024. But you'll see a drop of close to $2 million or a little bit over $2 million from 24 to 25 if you fund the $2.9 million in capital.
David,
So-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So I was going to say your unassigned fund balance, which is in that 65, 67% range, is going to drop to 42% if you follow this plan. Now, it's not red flagging because I've put that minimum bar of 30% in there. However, you all may look at that and say 30% is too low based on where I've been historically, which has generally been in that 50 to 80% range. So that would then lead us to say there's two ways to fix that number. Three ways: increase revenue property tax, decrease operating expenses, or turn off capital, push out capital out of fiscal 25. So 3 ways to get that fund balance back up. Or you all may say, I want to do all this capital, 2.9 million. The fund balance is going to drop. We know it's going to drop, but I'm still comfortable with $3.5 million in that fund balance, which is 40% of your expenditures.
Would you go back to where the capital improvement projects are?
Yes.
Okay, so the renovation of the old Public Works building, 500,000. Delete that.
Okay. We'll just
Or
turn
turn that off.
Yep.
And then the salt storage, a few items below, turn that off, 160. And then go to the, back to the fund balance.
So you're back up to 4.2 million, or right at 50% of your unassigned fund balance.
And we were, the previous number was 40, 41.
We were 41% and 3.5 million. Yeah. So again, I want to keep reiterating, these are based on projections and certain assumptions. If you outperform those assumptions, then those numbers could change. Conversely, if revenue streams don't materialize as expected or don't hit those assumptions, you could go a little bit under. But draws on use of fund balance is perfectly acceptable for the one-time capital projects. What you don't want to see is that your fund balance is going down, you're not funding capital projects, and you're using fund balance to pay for operating expenses. But if you're using it on a targeted basis for one-time projects, which is what you're doing here, that is perfectly fine as long as you're comfortable with what that projected ending fund balance is. And so I think that's where, Bob, we talked about, and Steve, maybe the starting point is what is that minimum comfort level that council has from a fund balance standpoint, and then you back into the projects to fund with that in mind. And with all of that, this is where the functionality of the model, we don't have to turn a project, we can move it out, or, it doesn't have to be, we're not ever doing it, it's just, we're not gonna do it in 25. And then if you fast forward a year and y'all had a really good year in 25, revenues came in stronger and your fund balance increased, well then maybe in fiscal 26, that project moves back in and you can fund it out of what came in above and beyond projections.
That's my question, because when we did the budget retreat, we had a wish list where we wrote everything possible that we wanted on the wish list. So I'm looking at these capital projects and I'm wondering if this is part of a wish list or if this is necessity. I'm just wondering, when I look at the different items on the list, to be, yeah, this would be great.
Well, all the capital is, it is a wish, it's a need or a want. What we typically do is we list everything for the next 5 to 10 years in, when is a backhoe going to need to be replaced? When is we'll not talk about a salt storage, a police car rotation or something like that. And typically what happens is when we get to a point in the budget like today, we move those out. We move those to future years. And that is a very simple way to balance the budget and make everybody feel good today. I still have to buy the police car someday. And so now if I move 2 police cars out, as an example, or a fire truck, and we continue to move those out so that we make the budget feel good for that 12-month period, the time will come when we have to buy 4 police cars or 2 fire trucks.
Gotcha.
And then we don't have the money to do it, and it's other councils have said, kick the can down the road. And so we have to be careful not to do that. So is it a wish or a want? let's take a police car. A police car is a need. We've discussed it forever about whether it's a benefit or not. You can always push those out a year, maybe two, but it compounds and it becomes an issue as we go forward. So is it a need today? It's on a schedule that says at this period of time, when the vehicle reaches this condition, we finance to replace it. I would argue that's good management. If we run into some budget difficulties, the issue is we can say, well, you know what, we're gonna drive it another year. As long as we all understand that when that year comes, that decision can't be kicked down the road again. I'm using the police car because that's a single capital item, but this is what happened to our utility. This is what happened to our roads. This is what happened to town hall. I can go through a number of projects that we're currently trying to catch up and fund. So their needs and their wants. At the budget retreat, we took the top 6, and only one of them was a project, and that was Buckeye Boilers, and we funded that in this budget. It's not even being discussed in the upcoming budget because the TDA, granted the town the money to do that. But all those items that we talked about in the budget retreat, project-wise, are not in the capital improvement plan. You'll see capital, which is equipment, vehicles, building improvements, things like that, things that we can capitalize. I do want to clarify a little bit. I told you that we were at $1.8 million at the beginning of the meeting, and you see on the model that it's about $2.8 million. If you'll go to the $1.2 million on paving. So the paving is not really a capital item, and in the past, paving has been put in culverts and ABC stone, which is gravel for the roads, has been put into the capital improvement budget. And it skewed those numbers because they're not capital items. The auditor can't capitalize a truckload of gravel and a culvert or pavement. So this year, we put that into the operating budget, so we give you a true operating budget. I've had a number of people say, what does it cost to maintain the town with no new stuff? What does it cost? And it was hard to answer that question because we had money in different places. So that 1.2 million shows up on the model in capital, as well as the culverts and the ABC stone. I've included those in the operational budget, and we'll discuss that on the 17th. So the numbers are going to be the same when we're done, but know that those dollars have been put into the operational budget.
No, but, so what you're saying is, although this is the CIP here, and it's in it, it's gonna be
It will be, it is included in the, which you don't have that today.
Right, right.
Steve and I are still drafting that, but
Right.
that 1.2 million in resurfacing, the 120,000 in ABC stone, and the $50,000 in culverts is in the operational budget. And you won't see that in the capital. So when you remove that from this piece of the model, you'll get to the 1.8 million that we discussed, I discussed at the beginning of the meeting. So I wanna make sure we're all on the same apples to apples, as we go forward.
And that's a change, we can make that change going forward. At the end of the day, the bottom line
Yeah.
is the same.
It's the same
Whether it's
bottom
coming out of operating expenses
Correct.
or capital, but yeah, that's good. Thanks for clarifying that.
And as I told you, at the 1.8, personally, I don't believe we can afford that, because you had told me, and the previous council has told me, not to go below 50% of fund balance. So if the model says I'm at 42, I'm not meeting the direction that I was given. So that's why I came to you today and said, we cannot afford what you asked me to do, unless you change your direction to me. So
we did tell you 50%? I don't remember.
You did not.
Oh, okay.
Last
The
year's
League
council,
of Municipalities is 37%.
Yeah.
that level was set by the previous council.
Okay.
And we use that as we go forward. So if you want me to use more fund balance than 50%, I need to know that. And I'm good with where you set that parameter, but right now, we've got it set at 30 for the model.
Not 50.
30 as a minimum where it red flags.
That's
If you go
where it red
below
flags,
30, yeah.
But it's at 49
Steve and
there.
I have
If you-
not brought, we will not bring you anything that brings fund balance below 50.
Yeah.
Which is what we did last year, and that's my fault. The three of you didn't sit here last year through this presentation.
Right.
I apologize for that. That 50% Steve and I have in creating the budget. So if you want to go lower than that, then we need to have that discussion.
Is that now's discussion?
But it's whenever you want to do it. We have maintained the no lower than 50%. And as you saw, we're at 67% as of June 30.
Which is, you know, in my opinion, is too high. I mean,
Well, that was, yeah,
we need to
the
pull some
whole
of that money out of the
valuation-
general fund
that went
and
up.
put it towards projects. But still maintain a safe, general fund. In my opinion, I think 50% is high. But, you know, I'm open for discussion with the council and see where that can be set. Because there are projects that we've kicked down the road and our revenue has been going up. We had a big revenue increase 2 years ago, which has increased our general fund. So why not, I'm not saying on a 10-year basis, but on a 1-year basis, or, we should look at taking some money out of general fund. Any further discussion?
I don't disagree with that, and I'm huge on staying equal, but not raising. So if we can fund the projects that are sitting there and not raise the ad valorem,
Right.
We are not proposing a raise in ad valorem, and I'm not proposing, well, you have before you capital that will take you below the 50%, and that's why we're having the meeting today. My recommendation is not to do that, because it doesn't meet the criteria that we brought forward. Let me just caution you that by setting that percentage, you may allocate funds that I realistically can't expend in a budget cycle. I use the salt building as an example. It's on here. That's a concept. We don't have a design. We don't have a piece of property. We have a need. And if you were to fund that July 1st, I realistically couldn't get that done and funded and expended in that 12-month budget cycle. So we showed that to you in phases as an example. So you can say to me, we're gonna spend a lot of our fund balance this year, and this is what I want you to do. You need to give me the opportunity to tell you what can I accomplish.
Sure.
Because just having the money isn't all that's needed. You have to be able to accomplish the project. We have staff and I have prioritized what we think you should fund this year in capital improvements. And it's roughly $650,000. We can do that, we want to do that, we think we can justify it. The 1.8 takes me below the 50%, and that's why we're having this discussion.
Right.
The town's been healthy at the 50%, and I think the historical data is keeping the town, that 50% has been keeping the town healthy. Chief, so you were saying, with $160,000 for the salt storage, that realistically you can't do it, so we can pull that 160 grand out. And something that I've been thinking about,
Well, no, that's not what I said. We originally gave it to you at 300,000, and then because I can't get that done in a year, we phased it, and we would like to have you consider the project first. We haven't even discussed that project. The 160,000 is the first phase to acquire land and do design. We have neither. We have a need and an idea.
so I mean, theoretically, we can take that 160 out.
You can take anything you want out, but if you want to do the salt storage program,
Some
I
money has
need
to be
some
spent.
money in next year's budget to get started.
So let's hold that thought. Let's go to the 500,000 for the renovation of the old public works building. That's and I've thought about this, and I brought this up maybe 2 or 3 years ago in a council meeting, that is prime real estate. And originally, and it's the focal point of our towns, you know, I mean, that's, you see that when you come through, you know, downtown or uptown Beach Mountain. And I don't know if this is feasible or not, but one of the things that I recommended 2 or 3 years ago is that we turn that into, we tear that facility down, and we find someone that wants to, we sell that property, or we lease it out to a builder that can come in and give us like a corporate center. You may have an attorney's office in there, you may have a physician, stockbroker, but make that into like a corporate business center, and see if we can get Kate to work on a project and go out and recruit someone that would be interested in a project like this, and, you know, have her spearhead this, and see if we can give a facelift to, you know, the entrance of Beach Mountain.
Well, I'm gonna say what I think Bob's gonna say. There is a need for this, things being done there, that if we eliminate that, it's gotta go somewhere else.
That's true, it's gotta go somewhere else, and that's, you know, he's talking about with the $160,000 that he's gotta go out and purchase land.
Right.
And I don't know how much land is available in this area. I mean, so we've got a current public works where it is, and it seems logical that we could potentially build another building that's between, you know, somewhere between Buckeye and coming back up towards Beach Mountain. So we got this end of the mountain covered, and then we have the lower end of the mountain covered. And we move, you know, part of Public Works and the shed to another, we build a location for it.
Sure.
Didn't we discuss this?
Yeah, at the budget
Last
retreat.
meeting, right?
Yeah.
About either tearing it down
And a
or,
decision was not found.
okay.
If I could help,
Revisiting.
we have $500,000 in the budget, and we've had it there for a number of years for renovating that building. There was a discussion, Alan brought it up during the retreat, about why put that money in the building if we can move it. And we never really got to a decision, so you see it in the CIP. If I could give you some context, Lake Coffee is going to be done. We have, you know, enough money to do that. In Lake Coffee is a storage building and a workshop for Public Works, for Parks and Rec, that has to be relocated. It'll be at the bottom of the lake. We believe we can use Lake Coffee funding to do that. We're moving other buildings, and we'll be able to move that. I don't
We're
have,
not talking about physically moving buildings, you,
no, building.
yeah, building new buildings.
But I don't have a spot yet. After this winter debacles, it became apparent that we need a satellite facility for salt and a place to stage some snow plows and equipment. Because once the traffic jam occurred, we could not get either, and we couldn't salt the road to get the traffic moving. It became, because our snow plows and salt trucks were in the traffic jam for 4 hours. So it became apparent that there's a need for a satellite salt storage and facility to put a snowplow and a salt truck. If in fact you want to not put $500,000 into this existing building, and we use that money, we can then consolidate and move the Lake Coffee building, put in a salt storage satellite and a building for the trucks, which is what we have up there. So you should take that into consideration in making your decision. There is the ability to combine all that and have one project. Unless you want us to go up and do the old Public Works, we will, but it seems that money could be used better elsewhere if we have to find another site and relocate buildings. So that, I don't have any details because I don't even know what it looks like. How much land we need, what's available, if anything, don't know. But we wouldn't want to spend $500,000 on a building that then a budget or two later, you tell me,
Rip it down.
we're gonna move. So I just want to be able to have that vision out there. None of that is funded. All of that is all of it, including the salt building, is in this CIP today for you to consider. And the mayor's already turned off some of it. So looking at it collectively, if that's something you'd like us to consider, give me that direction, we'll move down that road. If in fact you want the $500,000 to be kept in the CIP for the old public works, I need to know that as well. I have to produce you a budget on the 17th of April, and I need to know what at least I need to include on the capital improvement side.
So I may sound silly, but the annexation that we just got on
Buckeye
backside,
Creek.
yes, would that be possible for salt storage or?
Probably not.
Not
It's-
enough land,
it's-
is it?
Well, there's a road in the middle of that strip, the
Okay.
annexed. Daniel Davis has looked at some sites. You know, we wanna be careful because we gotta go out and negotiate for purchase. I don't want people to know where we're going so that the price goes up. So I just, but I'm to a point where I really can't take that step because I need direction from the council. Is this something you want us to investigate and come back to you? Fine, or is it you want to continue with the plan we had put forward?
I think this is the same point we were at during our retreat,
It is?
where we either have to say, this is what you need to do, and give you some direction, and, you know, move it or change the numbers in this, presentation, so that so you can move forward, and then, you know, the budget can move forward. I mean, I'm in favor of definitely exploring, we need to spend a few dollars to go see if we can get a design, what we need, design it, and where we could put it. And that's gonna cost some bucks, but I think it's, I'd rather put money into that than putting $500,000 into a building that's gonna rip down.
So line
What's-
58,
What's that?
line 58.
Yeah, so what's y'all's opinion about, potentially selling that property and turning it into a business center? Or, you know, we may even, Kate may, pitch it as a business center, and someone else that looks at the project may have different vision and say, well, what do you think about this? You know, maybe something totally different. But my point is that's very valuable real estate. And to have public works at that location, I think that the town can utilize its resources better than that.
I agree, absolutely.
And even just from the mere fact that we're sitting here discussing it, I think we need to go ahead and consider taking that $500,000 off this budget.
Would the sale of property be a source of funding
Yes,
the new?
Oh, absolutely.
yeah,
You know, I think we need to get it appraised. I mean, that would be,
I mean, I think we need to create a project, what we just outlined, basically. You know, what could we get if we were to sell it? What do we need to replace it? And then where could we possibly place it? And what would that cost?
what about the, where the fuel tanks are? Would those be relocated as well?
Yes,
Yeah, they need,
they're ugly.
yeah, they're terrible.
Well, like I said, I mean, that's the focal point of our town. And I think, you know, if we did something in that real estate, it would really enhance our community.
There's a great potential.
So we can pull the salt storage off.
Yeah, but I think what
No,
you're saying is
and-
Leave it on,
leave the line
salt
58,
storage.
but leave the rest of it take off.
right.
You know,
'Cause
leave
he-
that on and take off 59 and 60.
Well, if you're gonna take the 500 grand out, would we not take the, like a new public works building or whatever you wanna call it and combine that with the salt shed?
Yes, but that's what we're doing, is giving him $160,000 in next year's budget to do what he's gotta do to take us to the next step.
That's a large number to,
He's gotta have a facility to put the stuff in before you can tear the other building down.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're gonna have to do one project or the other.
We
Right.
gotta do one
That's the
before the
issue.
other.
We've got to do one or the other.
Yeah.
And if you want me to relocate, I've got to do that before we tear it down.
Yes,
Okay.
for
Right.
sure.
so,
The $80,000 for repaving can leave as well. The 500,000 as well as the 80,000, those are combined projects. That's repaving of that area.
Oh, okay, right.
So you can take that off as well.
So the capital improvement project, I see numbers going into 2028. How far out in this model is all the CIP stuff projected?
We have projects at least through, I mean, it can go out 10 years.
Okay.
So there's,
And that's mostly, I would assume, vehicles.
Yeah, the farther out you go, the less critical it is and the less accurate it is.
Yeah, but when you further out you go, you get $21 million for a sewer, you know, in 28.
But that's water and sewer, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's, we, in the, yeah, we've got the.
So do you need council's blessing to go out and,
I need direction. I'm to the point where Steve and I have
Okay.
reached a
I
point
see what
of,
you
we're done with our draft and we're ready to put our work product together, but these are decisions that I cannot make. So I need direction. Is this something you want us to pursue? We'll plug in the right numbers, take out the numbers like the 500,000, and that will have a more realistic picture of what our budget is going to look like, our draft budget that I'm going to give to you.
you guys in agreement, so we're moving 500
I mean, do
grand?
we need to do a, you know, a vote and,
I don't think, I need three or more of you to say this is what you want me to do.
Cut the 500,000.
Emily's
give
taking
them the-
notes and Steve's going on.
Steve left, didn't he?
No,
he's here.
Like, I'm out of here.
So with the two things we just turned off, where does that put us at that 50% mark?
49 and some change.
And so I think what Bob needs from us as well is an understanding of how low we want to take that percentage.
Yes.
Because old council said 50 is the lowest we're going. We've got to either say we're sticking with 50 or we're going to 40 or
45 or whatever.
whatever the recommendation is from the finance guys, right, on where that number should be.
Well, right now, we're sitting at 50% with no increase in ad valorem with the capital projects that are currently on the table, which I'm in agreement with.
You know, with my experience, you know, the few years that I've been on council, that 50% seems to be a balanced percentage.
And,
Seems to be high to me.
yeah, it
And
seems high to me.
it is high, because typical is supposed to be 33%.
I'd say in isolation, it's, there's plenty of your peers across the state that have 50%. In isolation, if I just came and someone hit me cold with what's a minimum, I would say 30 to 40%. The only thing I'd note is the 50% is a pretty big drop from where y'all been historically. And so if you look at a trend where you've been at 70, 80%, if you took it down to 35 or 40, that's a big drop over a relatively short period of time. So if you put it in that context, it's
Yeah,
it's
but
a
when
decline,
we were
but-
65, 67%, were we stating at that time that that's where we needed to be at? Or were we stating we need to be above 50%?
That's where we
It was
hit it.
50 was the
We
limit.
just hit
Was
it.
the limit, but
Yeah.
it was 67, so.
But what happened was 50% was the direction I've been given year after year. We had a substantial increase in revenues, and at that particular year, you know, we were challenged by the public that, well, you're just going to spend the money because you've got it, and we didn't, and so that increased our fund balance similarly to that 67%. And that's how we got to that range. That's the history of that.
Okay.
And in fact, the budget that year performed better. We were under budget. And so that just added to the fund balance, which isn't a bad thing, but that explains why we got to the 67. The 50% is what I've been told since I've been here. Don't take us below that.
Okay.
I should note one other thing. You'll see two percentages side by side. That second one, the one to the right,
Yeah.
that is your operating expenses plus your capital outlay. And so the reason we show them both ways, you know, your capital outlay is going to bounce around year to year. In some years it'll be big, which in turn drops the percentage down. So we've tried to just isolate it on your operating expenses, but also show you in terms of total expenditures, which does include your capital outlay. So this 1.8, 1.5, whatever it ends up being, that's getting factored into the denominator of the second scenario. So again, I think we're primarily focused on the percentage of operating expenditures, but I wanted point out that's the difference between those two percentages.
Alright,
I'd
so-
always err on caution, because we don't know what's gonna happen the
No, but I'm not-
next year
you
or
know,
two.
I'm more of opinion we should drop it for 1 year. I mean, and, you know, we don't have to say this goes forever, you know, we say, hey, for this budget, you know, do we do 45% and see where it
Well-
balances out?
And before you go down that path, you could easily tell me as the manager, you want to stay at 50%, bring us something that will work that keeps us within that, and I can do that. There are some things in here that we show as pay-go, coming out of fund balance, that quite frankly, if we don't get support from the TDA, we're not going to do. So
And that's in here.
and that's in here. And so, you know, I'm not trying to be the, you know, I can solve everything, but let's be careful about using our, going below. It becomes very easy if you say, okay, make it 40%. And next year I come back and I go, here's the budget with 40% fund balance again, because that's what you asked me to do last year. And then we get into that scenario.
Yeah.
I know I'm shooting myself in the foot, but
We need to move the town, we need to
We
stay forward.
well, I can do both. Again, remember what I said. I can only do so much in 12 months, no matter how much money you give me. My recommendation is leave it at 50 and let me bring you something on the 17th at 50. And if you don't like it and you want to use more fund balance, we'll do that. Give me a chance to work Steve and I the numbers. I gotta have Steve. And let's leave it at 50, and then let me come back on, the next chance we get to discuss this on the 17th. I can then give you some hard numbers on paper that you can look at, and we can say, this'll work, or you know what, we're not comfortable, we wanna do some more.
Okay.
I think that's
Will that work?
I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
it's a
totally
reasonable
reasonable.
approach. It's a responsible approach.
Yeah.
So did we take the 500 out of this?
We did.
So what's turned on right now, Chaz, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, for general fund, 2.3 million with the 1.2 million of the street resurfacing. So net of that, it's about 1,176,000 is currently turned on in there, which includes the 160,000 for that step one. And that's getting you to that roughly 48%. So I'm not saying, Bob, that's where you end up, but that's currently what's turned on in
Yeah.
there.
Everything to do with Public Works, current old building has been turned off. That's the paving.
Except for
and
the
building.
160.
The 160 is
It's
looking
sad.
for a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm looking, you know, I'm just going down this list trying to figure out what Steve and I are gonna do. And I've got, you know, probably $150,000 that I'm going to ask TDA to fund that will come out of here. So we can get pretty close to 50%. At least let me give it a try and get it to you on the 17th. And then on the 17th, I may tell you, look, couldn't do it,
You'll
but I
know,
think I can.
you'll know from TDA by the 17th,
We'll talk to him. soon.
No, we're gonna talk to them tonight.
okay?
But
TDA's
this-
here.
But that gives you the 1.2 in paving is in there.
Yes. I 1.2 in paving, culverts and stone is out of capital, it's in operating.
operating.
And I have that in operating.
Okay. 'Cause I'd be against reducing that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Amen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm right, Steve, correct? Okay. You throw something at me when I
What
say
do
something.
we spend this year in paving?
Excuse me.
800?
About 800,000.
We
Oh, there it
didn't
is.
spend- we didn't
Thank
spend
you.
it all.
He's good.
Is there anything else we see in here that jumps off the page that?
Are there, the model is really in-depth and dynamic. Is there
Yeah.
any scenarios, even high-level scenarios you'd like us to look at, or you have, like the mayor said, show me 47
Yeah.
cents. We can do that on the utility as well, the rates on utility and sanitation. So I don't know if you've got any questions or something you wanna see. we've got the experts here today. They won't be here the next time I run the model with you, and certainly not as good as Chaz is. So
Yeah.
anything you want to see, now's the time to ask the question and see what it does to the finances of the town.
We were discussing earlier changing the rate structure for water and sewer based on consumption. And then that's a tiered approach, that the more you use, the higher you get. When you hit a certain tier, you're gonna get.
Right.
And would we know did you have any ideas on what that would look like? Or what?
I don't, because we really haven't decided, are we going, is it, what's the increment? And if you recall last meeting, you authorized me to get a rate study and system development fee. We're in the process of
Okay.
selecting an engineer. That's a complicated formula. Once we get that done and you approve it, it'll be plugged into the model. So if you do a rate adjustment for, what you would talk about is doing a rate adjustment for single family that uses less than 3,000 and having people who use substantially more pay more into the system. When that is done, we'll plug that into the model and you'll be able to see that.
Did any of Sean's stuff get in this budget?
Yes. Yeah, he's got
Oh, there it is, okay.
resurfaced gym
Yeah.
floor, he's got a skid steer, he's got things on the sledding hill.
Yeah,
And those are the items I'd like TDA to consider.
Would you say that total around 120 grand
Yeah,
in that neighborhood?
something there. But those are projects that are in the CIP. I had also, as I reported earlier today, I had also asked, TDA to look at some things they could fund that aren't projects, that aren't capital, that could offset some of the impact to the taxpayers. And that, I gave them a list of that, and we should be prepared to discuss that as well.
Do we need to do, there is nothing in the sewer and water that we need to look at, or is that?
We can, the utilities actually pretty healthy, based on, rates that have increased over time. David gave you a pretty good report on the utility. We have some major expenditures that come out of the utility, but we also have some major grant funding that has come in as well. So, the picture needs a little explanation to be clear, but, the model shows it. Can you go to that
The dashboard tab. So on the utility side, while the general fund, we're primarily focused on your fund balance for the utility fund. We're also focused on your cash or fund balance, as well as what we call debt service coverage. So debt service coverage is what a lender will focus on when they lend you money and determine your credit worthiness, which impacts your interest rate. And debt service coverage is looking at operating revenues less operating expenses to get to net revenues, and you divide net revenues by debt service. So that's coverage. A good, or I should say a minimum coverage level that y'all would want to hit would be 1.2 times. So your net revenues is covering your debt service for existing and future debt by 1.2 times. The higher, the better. It's kind of like fund balance. You got a minimum, but if you can aim higher, great. It helps you, gives you more cushion. And then you look at the cash as well. So when we look at your water sewer fund, based on all the projects that are turned on, based on the grant funding that's either identified or potential out there, your cash balance remains really strong. If we focus on fiscal 25 and kind of beyond, it does bounce around anywhere from 1.9 to 2.5 million, really focusing on the next 5 years, which is about a year's worth of cash on hand, which is again a good number. A year's worth of cash on hand. Oftentimes you see more cash in the utility fund just because some of those capital projects that can come up, or emergency type projects, a line breaks, something breaks, you got to have cash on hand for that. So a year is a good target. We have a minimum of 6 months on hand that would red flag. And then your debt service coverage is really strong across the board. Each and every year you're well over 1.2 times. And so the driver of this is just really going to be your cash balance, and trying to maintain that similar to your general fund at a level you're comfortable with. what's showing here is a good anywhere from 9 to 12 months on hand.
And Bob, you threw us the other day about, you know, the future sewer problems. Have we put any of that into consideration on these?
I should learn not to speak. I'll report to this more at the April meeting, but we, after I had that discussion with you of our sewer plants running at
Right.
over 100%, we had a substantial failure, which we're struggling with now to come up with a solution, which is going to be relatively expensive. No, that currently has not been taken into account, but as David just said, those are the type of things that you keep your cash on hand, fund balance, however you want to look at it, because things happen and those are expensive repairs.
Yeah.
So we've got a substantial sewer issue repair that's facing us right now, that will be expensive. And we really don't have an engineered solution yet to it, so I don't even know how bad it's gonna be. But understand, and I'll have a better report, at the April meeting, but we've got, some failed infrastructure at our main sewer plant that has no redundancy, that was when it was built, and it's gonna require, shutting the plant down and creating some bypass and some other treatment options while the repairs are made. And all that looks expensive to me.
Looking forward to our April meeting.
Yeah. Can you go back to the dashboard on sanitation? So you notice all the highlights on sanitation, as early as 25. Those are red flags that the model tells us we anticipate a problem. We're aware of this, and we actually discussed this with you back at the retreat, I hope. When we made the big switch in sanitation with the previous council, and with the commercial accounts, we decided not to do any rate adjustment until we got a better handle on what the commercial accounts would do and what that tonnage loss would be and what our actual expenditures would be to run the system. We now have that data, and we'll be coming to you in this budget to solve this issue here, and it will be a combination of rate increase and reducing expenditures.
So are we in the red in 25 or 29?
25.
So 25 is red flagged, falling below. We've got a dollar threshold, but if you focus again with the utility funds like we do, days cash on hand, that 180 days, and so you are falling below that. You're still positive. You still have a positive fund balance until you get to 2029, but it's obviously from 24 to 25. It's a big drop.
Below the threshold.
And this is why this is a microcosm of why we have this model. Without being able to project this out, we wouldn't be able to come to you and give you information that says this is what we need to do, not only for 25, and you'll say, well, we're in the black in 25. Why are you doing this? Because in 29, if we continue the trend, we'll be in the red. So that right there is how valuable this model is to us, because then instead of waiting to 29 where it's an emergency again, kick the can down the road, and then we come to the residents and we say, we need this huge increase because we didn't manage the sanitation well in the previous 4 years. So this is why this model is so valuable to us, because we can see those projections. If everything stays the same, we run out of money. And so we want to start addressing that in this budget year, and we'll discuss that on the 17th.
If you only ran the recycling center 5 days a week rather than 6, would that save? How would that counter this?
Well, I don't know. Anytime you reduce expenditures, you're going to have a positive impact on your model, as well as if you increase revenues. As I said just a minute ago, I think the solution that we're going to bring to you is a combination of both. I think there's a rate increase that's justified, and I think we need to reduce expenditures. And whether that's at the convenience center, whether that's tipping fees, whether that's administrative, I don't know. We're gonna bring you some ideas and you'll tell me what to do. Anything else for David on the model? Because we really need to get to the TDA.
Yeah. No, this is great stuff. Thank you.
So Steve runs this model for us at the town. I proclaim to, but I don't, because I call Steve when I get stuck. So as we move forward, this isn't a once-a-year thing. We have to maintain
Oh,
it.
this isn't theirs? This is the town's?
It is the town's model that they have provided us, and
Right.
and Steve spends a lot of time on the phone with them, updating information. The point I'm trying to make is this isn't a once-a-year thing. The dashboard, we can show you any council meeting you want if you want to see the graphs in the dashboard. The behind the scenes, and you've only seen a tiny, tiny piece of this. The behind the scenes Steve runs for us, along with David. So what we want to do is make sure if you have a question, don't wait till a council meeting, come in and see us, see Steve. And we can pull up the model at any time and do your what if. What if we, like, Mayor, if you want to know if we reduce sanitation expenditures by X amount of dollars, what does that do to the rate? We can do that. Okay?
It's a very useful financial tool.
No, it's invaluable. To manage the town, at the level we need to manage it, it's invaluable. Because like I said in the beginning, if you just want to manage it 12 months at a period, that's easy, except it sets us up for failure.
Well,
Okay.
Anything, you got anything to add?
No, that's all
Thank
great,
you
as
very
always.
much.
Yeah, thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
thank you.
Great, thank you.
Steve, you got anything?
No, I think, well covered. We can probably make some good assumptions on the future budget and where we want to go.
Okay.
Great. All right, thank you.
Hey, thank you guys very much. All right, we gotta wait for the mayor? We can have the vice mayor.
I didn't hear the adjournment.
No, well,
You can drink that water.
so.
You got your own, you brought your own CP customer. Whoops.
Fire truck. In 27. Yeah. Well, all it is a journal entry that says we put this money over here.
The building department.
It's not available
We
in
couldn't just
27.
buy it and put,
Right.
camper changes all your. No, no, I agree.
Well, yeah, but
I just didn't want to
Yeah.
make sure it wasn't.
Because
That $1 million is a tar or something like that.
what we want to make
Again.
sure is that in 27, when the truck comes due, the money is there to pay for it. Not wait till 27 to say, oh, by the way, write me a check.
But in,
be
but if this model went in 27,
There's people up here who.
If the model shows it as pay-go, and it comes out of assigned fund balance. There's a note in there. You know where he shows the funds, it comes out of assigned fund balance in 27.
I'm just that. When we start playing with spreadsheets,
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, no,
that's what I wanted to know.
okay.
Thank you.
Just want to ride a closed gap.
Yeah.
Although it's really.
Do what?
I think they're strapped together.
You want me to have those moved? Riley, can we move these?
We're just having.
Can we move the monitors over? Adam, so they can see the audience.
Okay.
Let's just swing it. Yeah. How's that?
That works?
Mayor, the next item is a meeting with the TDA.
Okay.
And as I said earlier, you know, I invited them here at their request and said we were having this meeting and hopefully we didn't bore them to death. But I do have a list that I shared with the TDA, but I didn't share with you, of some items that I thought the TDA could help the town out. And I've discussed it with them, and I don't know, Jenna, is she?
I moved over.
Now I can't see you. I don't know if you want to speak to it or how you want to do this. I'm just going to turn it over to the two boards.
We just need to get some numbers on the list that we got from Bob. We're really excited to work hand in hand and side by side. We're just looking for numbers so that our budget can be complete and that we can work together. We went through and we believe we can work a lot of it between our two buckets. As everyone knows, promotional destinations are 2/3 and that's the majority of where our money is. And it's all in the verbiage, of protecting the town and protecting the money, that no one comes after anybody who tries to sue them. So we're looking forward to what those numbers look like, what helps out the town, and how we can continue to move forward.
You want those numbers from me?
Yeah.
Okay. You've got your list, Jenna? So I asked them, here's some suggestions I gave them at their request. Assist with landscaping and grass cutting. We spent $110,000 on a vendor to maintain the parkway predominantly and the parks. And other TDAs have been able to fund that. So that would be $110,000 offset to the town. I'm going to go down. I'd ask to contribute to Sled Hill operations labor. It was an idea. I don't know what that would be. So let's not put a number there yet. Recreation facilities maintenance, they already did that, $196,000.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
We had discussed funding studies for traffic and public transportation. We've all discussed it at both boards here and at TDA. The town doesn't have the expertise to do a bona fide transportation and traffic study. I asked Preston to go out and solicit some firms that would do that. He gave me a $15,000 estimate. He called a couple traffic engineering firms. I asked to fund some traffic study equipment. Quite frankly, this is a traffic counter. It's $6,000, and what it does is it doesn't use anything in the road that we would tear up with a snowplow. It uses some sort of radar, sonar technology, but it tells us the size of the vehicle and the direction of the vehicle and counts those over a period of time.
Deer?
Oh, no.
Who knows?
Let's not go there.
Chief, would that cover coming in the back way as well?
It's where we put it.
Okay.
It's
Location.
semi-permanent. It goes on a post.
Okay.
We had envisioned putting it up front. The reason, a little back history. MLK weekend, we had seat of the pants estimated we had 8,000 vehicles that weekend, which translated into, quite a few people. It'd be better to have empirical data that we could rely upon that said, this is what we counted here, move it to the back gate, this is what we counted, they were leaving, they were coming, they were going. I think it would be a good fit for the TDA.
Okay.
Would it be worth having two of them so we can do comparisons for the same weekends? How many people are coming off the back gate? How
Well,
many
you
people-
could, it's,
Anything's possible.
anything, we can do anything you want. You're learning me. I said contribute to code enforcement labor. I don't have a number there. I don't even know if that's possible, so let's move past that. Contribute to the visitor center operations, operational costs. That's kind of a sore subject, but we don't know what that is yet. We haven't even got the building, dried in. So let's move past that. For some reason, I have it twice. The public safety signage for the police department, those are $15,000. That's an item that you have in your budget under capital. You just saw it. And we will not buy another one by the taxpayers if the TDA doesn't fund it. So that's one of those items there.
You know, you mentioned code enforcement a moment ago and didn't have a number there. I mean, I think I don't want to say easily put a number there, but I think a good guesstimate would be somewhere between $15,000-$20,000 that the town probably pays in overtime. I mean, does that sound
Well,
accurate?
no, because I don't have a code enforcement officer assigned yet, so I don't know what. We're just bringing on a person to do code enforcement in April.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I was thinking about the overtime that public safety had to work.
Well, let's go back to grass cutting.
Okay.
So the TDA is restricted by statute on what they can actually spend money on. It's broad. There's a lot of gray area, a lot of wiggle room. But I think Councilman Beckman said you gotta pass the red face. Can you stand up and justify it without having a red face? So could the TDA write a check for public safety overtime due to a busy weekend? Probably not. Probably get a red face trying to explain that one. But certainly they could contribute to the grass cutting. So on the town's pot of money, if there's $100,000 from the TDA to cut the grass, and I have $100,000 of overtime, which we did this winter on public safety and public works, it's a wash. The TDA can legally do it, and the town taxpayer is made whole. So this list was put together with that in mind. So I don't think you can ask the TDA to write a check for overtime, but we can find ways that they legally can fund, which will offset the taxpayer's cost. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. The rest, we had fund entrance sign. We don't even have a design for that. We don't even have an idea, so why put some money down there and just have it sit on a list? And contribute to increased holiday decorations, maintenance, and labor. They've already done that. They're the ones, the TDA, signed a multi-year, 3-year contract for the lights we had on the parkway. So that's been done. And I think it was last on my list. The issue there was we're spending, the town taxpayer is spending considerable amount of staff time after hours trying to keep the lights lit. It's a never-ending battle. Susie used to have this issue. Now Sean and Kate and the guys down at Public Works or at Parks and Rec have to do that. So I don't have a number for that, and we should probably just leave that off. So the 4 items that I came up with that I think, Jenna, to give you some numbers, the landscaping, which I think is justifiable, the traffic studies, the traffic equipment, and the public safety sign that we use only for visitors. We don't use them for the taxpayers.
Is one sign enough there?
We-
We don't want any more signs, but
Well,
if necessary.
we have 3.
Well, okay.
We have
We
3.
borrowed one from the state.
We
right?
borrowed 2 from the
Two
state.
from the state.
But to answer your question, Fred, the police chief has given me that list. He said 1.
And that's 15 or 16.
15,000 is,
Yeah.
and that's one that appears in your budget. So.
And the state never asked for their stuff back, right?
We took it back.
Oh, did?
Yeah, we did. We took it back. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jenna, but on my list, that's pretty much what I came up with, that I can give you good justifiable numbers.
But is there anything in our budget, both on the operating side and on the capital side, that, like the grass cutting, that we could swing to them? Because, every dollar goes there is a dollar less we have to spend, or a dollar we put to something
The
else.
taxpayers don't have to spend.
Well, that $100,000 for grass cutting is a perfect
That's
example
a
of that.
perfect, that's an easy one.
And then on the project side, the Buckeye boilers is another perfect example. So I think we've done that.
How about a sewer problem?
I don't think they, I don't think,
I mean, come on.
I don't think they have enough money. You know, the relationship between the town and the TDA is good. You know, we had a good retreat. I was probably a little blunt with the TDA, but I never want to be accused of not getting to the point. So I did. And the TDA has stepped up to the plate. I mean, Alan doing the boilers at Buckeye is a big deal, real big deal for the town. The taxpayers would have had to fund that, so. I'll be quiet.
Jenna, where's, you know, from your point of view, I mean, these are just a few things. Is there things that I know you guys had a wish list that you started with, and then Bob kind of pushed your wish list down and kind of tried to supersede it. Is there stuff where you're looking at things that would, you know, benefit us and save taxpayer dollars?
I'm happy with the 4 prices that we just got. Those projects seem very palatable.
Done.
We can work through that, I feel extremely easily. We have a Parks and Recs committee that will go and support, and what can we do, or can we push? So, you know, there's a lot of those projects that lay on my heart that I want to continue to push through and do. We are also working in our marketing side to educate, our short-term rental owners. That needs to be done. I am really excited about, STR code enforcement and education. And so those are gonna be really big pushes that you'll hear from me on TDA.
Which should result in revenues too.
With that, and I think that's a great idea. But what kind of, with a lot of the folks that do the short-term rentals here, and there's, you know, 2 or 3 probably main real estate companies, are those the companies that you're trying to focus? Because I know folks that have rented places up here, they don't know where to take their trash, and they have, I think, a handful of questions that it should be in, like, the packet when they rent a place. So how are you trying to improve the lines of communication there?
Right now, it's just going to be educate, in my world, that's planning board. They're the ones who have to set the compliance, correct?
No,
No? Okay, I apologize.
but that's okay.
Well, I know they had put together a packet for a council, I don't remember which council to approve, and I was excited about the pieces that were inside of it, and it didn't go through. So right now, what we can do is we can educate people who own STRs, listen, watch your pricing. When you drop your pricing down, you're actually paying people to come and stay in your own home, because you're still paying for your electricity, your water, all this, and people don't realize what they're doing because no one's standing side by side with them to help them see what's going on. You're also wanting to educate them on what your price is and the type of clientele you're bringing in. So I want to work to educate our owners. Let's bring in the right clientele that love our mountain and not trash it.
So do you have a list of the owners?
So that is on our to-do list. We have 2 different programs that we're looking at that would help us with compliance, to contact our owners and also make sure that they're following up on everything that is supposed to do legally.
Yeah, I mean, I still believe I think somebody said it was 80% that we think we have, that we know of. I think it's less than that.
Well, we paid for a study a couple of years ago
Yeah.
that,
We paid for a firm that went out and did that analysis.
right,
So, I mean, our new, well, I'll use roughly code enforcement personnel. I mean, would they be tracking down that type of stuff, or?
No. The current law in the state doesn't allow the town to register STRs. They can't be
Oh,
treated
yeah.
any differently than a single-family home. And we're not allowed to take our list. We I won't say we get around it. We have a safety affidavit requirement to make sure that your STR is safe. And we're not permitted to share that list with our tax collector who collects the
6% down.
the occupancy tax. The law doesn't permit that. Now, it's the same person,
Yeah.
but, you know, we collect the affidavit and we create a list, and then we have a list of who pays taxes, and the two cannot be combined.
But I know we have a problem where VRBO doesn't itemize when they send us the 6%.
They're not prohibited. They're not required by state law. They have an exemption. So all of your VRBOs and all the ones that do that submit their occupancy tax lump sum monthly, I believe, and they don't list. And they're not required, and they won't list the individual properties.
The best form of offense is to have your neighbors turn them in.
Well, we have that. I mean, there's, and I apologize, I've shared this with previous council. We have a number of things. We encourage neighbors. We had a thing at the recycling center where if you showed up without a placard and you had a bag of garbage, we would turn you away unless you told us where you stayed. And then we take your garbage and send you on your way. We had a great list. And then we sent you a letter, and said, you know, your renter is improperly dumping garbage at the recycling center, and we noticed you're not paying occupancy tax. Thank you. Here's a bill. You know, those were programs that we put in place, and they were successful, and we still do some of those. The SDR Helper was the firm that the TDA funded, and the town administrated that. And in the first year, it was very profitable because they went out and caught a great deal, and it was rather expensive. In years 2, 3, 4, and 5, there wasn't much return on the investment because all the work had been done in the front end. So I think the TDA is looking at reinvigorating that program again to see what's changed. But the law is not on our side in managing these. There was 2 major cases that had gone through the courts. One was in Asheville, and Asheville had zoning requirements, and they had registration, and they even had a lotto if you could get a license and things. And that was all struck down, and that law is what gave us you can't ask them to register. So Janet was talking about the planning board. The planning board did review this and created a fairly good report and offered 2, they're well aware of the law, offered 2 paths. The path that was chosen by the town council at the time was to enforce existing ordinances. The problem being we don't have the resources to do that. We're putting that in place now. And 2, other than complaint driven, you can't go knock on the door and say, are you renting your house, or contact those type of things. So we have a parking ordinance, we have trash, we have noise, all those things the planning board said needs to be enforced, and we are, but they're complaint driven, and that's not being proactive, that's being reactive. And it doesn't do much for the taxpayer living next door to this STR that has to complain all the time for code enforcement. So it's not an easy task, and we certainly don't have the answer yet.
How did you get around where requiring the safety checks?
I didn't say we got around anything.
No,
And if I did,
that's wrong. How did we enforce that?
We're being recorded.
Yes.
There is a component of the law that allows for safety issues, and it would be like smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, things like that. And so what we can't do is go inspect. So what we did is we created the affidavit in an ordinance that requires the affidavit to be signed and notarized annually by the owner of the house that they checked in their phone line. We have an ordinance that says you have to have a landline in that rental. and that all their safety issues were there and working, and they had to attest to it and send it to us. Then that helps us keep things safe out there.
So the 4 items that you had requested and gave TDA, are you guys on board with that?
We're interested in putting it into our budget for this year. And out of those 4 that you just gave me, how many of those were on that projection that y'all are working through?
Just the traffic sign for the police, the 15,000. That's a capital item. So Sean has in his budget that I'm listing is funded by TDA. He has a number of things as well. Do you have those? So that equals, hang on, that equals $270,000, his projects. That included the message board, so deduct that. So he has asked in the budget, and we'll be submitting it to you on the 17th, a Shane Park Pavilion for $47,000, a skid steer for $52,000, a sled hill groomer for $14,500, a boat dock for $8,500, and resurface Buckeye Playground at $148,000. Those total $270,000.
Were they in that budget we looked at?
No, they'll be in your
The next budget, the April.
17th, and those will be noted as to be funded by TDA. They have not agreed to that, but for me to show it to you, I need to show the accompanying revenue. So when Steve put the budget together, you'll see it'll say funded by TDA, and I'll tell you that if it's not funded by TDA, we won't do it. The taxpayer won't pay for it. So we have the similar revenue to show that. So if the TDA doesn't fund those, we'll reduce the revenue and take that project off the budget. That's how I'm gonna show it to you on the 17th.
Is there, so does the TDA need to have a discussion on this before you just stamp it?
Well, we need to approve it at our meeting.
When will that be?
It's the next meeting coming up for this coming month. It'll be Thursday, what?
It will be Wednesday, April
When?
17th, the 17th of April.
So that's the same.
Well, you're saying we need it sooner than that for y'all's benefit?
I don't know, I don't think so. I didn't know what the process was, if that's something that could be
Okay,
agreed
can I
upon.
say something at this point? Okay, first of all, all these things seem pretty good. I'm just talking to Fred Fole, I'm only one of 5. But I'm sure some of the others have thought these things out, and I can say, I think our group is pretty much coherent as far as wanting to get this money that's sitting in the bank out doing some good. And Fred Fole considers the money is the people's money. And it needs to go toward helping with the tax situation within the town. And if we can do something, that money sitting there is not doing any good. It needs to be out. And there are a lot of ways that we can make things look good in our town to be more attractive to those coming and looking and enjoying this mountain, just like beautification materials and all that. I think we could go a long way to try to get back to when Susie was doing things. And whether it's the size of the hanging basket you hang on the telephone pole, or whether it's somebody maintaining things which they work at, and I understand, but I think it's making our town look good from the inception of putting out flower barrels on corners that we did in 1981 to now. We've gone through a lot, but I think we need to keep doing it and continue to make it look good. And I think most of us would like to continue to make our town look the best we possibly can. And in the same vein, recreation is the only thing that we have to sell on Beach Mountain. We don't have a smokestack industry somewhere within our town, and so recreation and the way we can improve what we already have is of utmost importance as far as I'm concerned. And talking a little bit from the recreation standpoint, I think this, and I've talked to the committee, that this needs to be the year that we concentrate on two things. First of all, get the Buckeye Rec Center, everything taken care of down there, whether it's, we've already done the heating and air, or whether it's a few leaks in the roof, or any other small things that are on, Sean's budget to make that building be at its possible best. And I'm not talking about building a swimming pool or increasing the weight room, or I'm talking about taking what we have and taking care of what we already have. And then going outside, you know, we've got a heck of a lot of things around here, and we hope all of y'all will enjoy when do a little tour around and get a good idea, and I'm sure you do know pretty much, but whether it's making sure all our hiking trails, Emerald out back, each trailhead and signage for all of these things are the best they can possibly be. The playgrounds we have, one of the things was on Sean's list is putting down a surface on the one out at Buckeye, and that's important. But we need to get this money out and get it working on things to improve what we already have. And that's Fred Folds' feeling.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I concur. It's the people's money.
So your meeting's on the 17th also? Okay, that's great.
Yeah, we don't need to rush it because of the way we're proposing it to you.
It's them or no.
Yeah, and so it's, you know, you'll make some decisions on the 17th, the TDA will make some decisions. We'll adjust the budget based on whatever you tell me and everything else, and based on the TDA. And as we go into May, the budget will then become much clearer, and what projects will be funded and what won't. So there's no rush. It doesn't, we don't have a conflict.
Thank you for being here.
Anything else, Chief, we need to review? Council, any comments?
No, very educational.
Very good. If anyone has any questions, comments, feedback, if you'll send your comments to Chief Pudney, it would be appreciated. And hopefully he'll share them with us as well, because we do want to hear your opinion. So thanks for those that attended today. And if there's nothing else, we will adjourn the meeting.
Sounds good.
Council, thank you. I'm sorry it went a little late.
It's a little late.